Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Vortex, where lies and falsehoods are trapped and exposed. I'm Michael Voris. If we can use a word from the communist propaganda machine, there's a lot of misinformation out there. And yes, misinformation from communists is always lies, even if there might be some kernel of truth here or there. But being honest, there's also a lot of misinformation in the Catholic world as well. And it's not usually told to you deliberately to lie to you, usually, but that still doesn't make it reliable. One of the things we here at Church Militant have noticed, especially in the last few years, is a proliferation of commentary and stories that have no context, sometimes aren't even true, or at best are nothing more than news to tickle your ears. For that reason, to combat that, as well as to provide you much needed context to help you better understand the world around you, we've brought back our popular The Download program. The discussions are very wide-ranging, but they help you connect the dots and detect the patterns, the trends that really dictate our lives.
Wait a minute, things aren't getting better in the church. How can they get better in the church?
Or anything.
And how are things going to get better in the government? I thought we had this in the bag, and now you only got three triangles in a stool, and you got religion and politics, and those two legs already broke off, and now you're sitting here on the culture, which is driven by economics, and we're telling you here today that leg is cracking.
It's about to go.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
So where do you go? And this is why, if you weren't upset about what happened in the church, you ain't got time for politics, you got time for economics. What's it going to take to get you to go back to confession, to get yourself straight with God? Because you may not have a whole lot of time to do that.
As the church goes, so goes the world. And if we see that the world is going to hell, well, it's because the church, the bishops primarily are supposed to be they're supposed to be the sentinels standing guard against the influx of evil. They're supposed to be the ones protecting the rest of the flock, and yet many of them are allowing the evil to come. Some of them are even inviting it in. All you have to look is the German bishops.
More than
the German bishops, promoting homosexual unions and saying, screw you to the magisterium and the Pope and all of that, and saying we're going to do our own thing.
Nobody is coming to save you. That's a great line. I'm not talking about spiritually. Obviously, our Lord is that spiritually, but on the natural plane, no one is coming to save you. So get this notion out of your head. And what has been conditioned, think about that outrage of the Trump judge getting, shouted down in Stanford. And, they gave the little, you shouldn't do that. We'll put you on paid leave for a little bit until the media goes away, and then we'll restore you to your stuff. There's this drilling, this propaganda going on in young people's minds at colleges and now all over social media and everything else, that you get to do whatever the hell you want. And your opinion is just as valid as someone else's opinion, regardless of what it's about. You can't run a country like that. You can't run a world like that. You can't run a civilization like that. The idea, even in the church, let's hand out surveys to people who don't go to mass and don't believe anything about the faith, and ask them what they think about the faith. Oh, it says right here we need to promote homosexuality. NFT babies, those fine. Oh yeah, those you won't have to go to mass anymore. Those 10 Commandments really. Let's cross them out, make them options. All right, so let's build a synod around that and start doing it.
Yeah, it's insane, right? In the couple of years we've had since the download was back on hold, the sheer amount of news and happenings has increased dramatically. And there is no end to the commentary and personal opinions of people who don't really know that much about what they're talking about. The producers here at Church Militant have our heads collectively buried in this stuff every single day, so it's almost second nature for us to get on camera and help you understand the interconnectedness of everything. To stress that point, one viewer recently commented to us, "This is by far the best of CM. The chemistry, the expertise, the pacing, pump this show out all day, every day." Well, we are kind of doing that. For example, the two recent dueling federal court rulings about the abortion pill, which is now headed to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Actually, there are some states that have, I think there's maybe a couple states that have imposed that restriction where you have to do it in person because of this. But there are some states that are like, nope, mail it, do it by mail. abortion by mail, that's what they're calling it now. They've already legalized that in the UK,
Right.
which a lot of people are upset about.
And
But
maybe
yeah.
a woman's 10 weeks and, a couple more days along, or, another 11 weeks along. Why should be able to take this? No one's sitting there giving her counseling about how drastic this is if you're taking it too far along in the pregnancy.
Exactly, which is why so many women, as many as 6% of these women in the US end up in the ER because they had no idea about the complications. Like I said, most of those, because they still have parts of their baby in their stomach and it's getting infected. 6% translates to more than 20,000 women per year in the United States.
That was my question. Are hospitals required? I know there are extraordinarily strict reporting requirements for all sorts of things when it comes to the medical field. When I was back in news, I did back in secular news, I did a big, giant story on the mortality tables, but I remember that the reporting requirements for hospitals on everything. You walk in with a stubbed toe, they got to record it as that. There's Medicare codes and Medicaid codes that go along with it, and insurance codes. That is an empire of data and information. I'm curious if this particular thing, if you report, self-report, or call an ambulance because you can't do anything, is this tracked, or is this another one of the sort of sacred cow things that we can't talk about it because it's about abortion, even though people die?
I think it's tracked by the FDA, but it's not reported because it's not required to be reported. So if you want to find out about it, you've got to write to the FDA and ask them, give me the statistics, but they don't report it anywhere publicly.
And then our hospitals, because some things are required to be reported on a federal level, others are required to be reported on a state level. And I'm wondering which one of these two, does it fall under both categories? I would not be surprised if you went, like here in Michigan, for example, because it's such a pro-abortion state, that you would, whatever the federal reporting requirements were, could be sidestepped by state reporting requirements, and you call both and you get two entirely different sets of data. So the data, I'm going to guess, is not reliable, which is my big long way around the barn way of saying those numbers you gave, I bet, are much lower than what the reality is.
As another example, a few days ago, the homosexualist priest Father James Martin announced that he has assembled what he calls an impressive group of biblical scholars, no they're not, who through their combined degrees have determined that the church's teaching is wrong and the Bible, get this, actually supports gay sex. That news story was spun off into this discussion.
What we're seeing with outreach and Father James Martin and the really heightened scrutiny that this issue is receiving, because if you look at LGBT people, they're a very small fraction of the nation of Western society, 3 to 5%-ish. But we have all this attention on
Unless you're in
these
Gen
things.
Z, now it's 20%.
No, that's LGBTQIA. That's including allies, which is like practically everyone who doesn't have a strong will. See, this is how they gin the numbers up. Or the other one, this is kind of a tangential, throwaway comment, but it's like, just because you can't get a date with a girl doesn't mean, dude, that you're bi. There you go.
A lot of these
that's
kids
very Joe Enders.
They're just going through phases. A lot of them are just going through phases, or think it's popular, or they think now it's like the new punk rock thing. That's the way you go against the grain. Is I'm going to be gay because that's how
That's how it is.
When it was me, it was like, yeah, I'm going to be punk rock. That's how. Now it's I'm going to be gay.
We've
or now
discussed
it's
how
actually
you
now I'm
were
going to be
punk.
trans.
I want pictures. Sorry, Dave, you were saying.
Well, sure. So we're seeing a really disproportionate amount of emphasis placed on this issue, and it's partly, and by the way, to the chagrin of really legitimately married heterosexual couples, because the church doesn't even talk about marital heterosexual relations this much. We have all this emphasis on gay sex. The church has never even formally defined a lot of conjugal love issues, and it's left up to theologians to debate. But leaving that aside, it's because there's this gay priesthood cabal where you have this disproportionate amount of focus on this thing, because guess what? A lot of our theologians are gay.
It's truer words never spoken. The communist modernists in the church and the communist Marxists outside the church have developed quite the impressive arsenal of misinformation, some of it by just sheer volume. And Catholics, as well as others of goodwill, need to be able to understand how to cut through their garbage. We also need to understand that these two dynamics, modernism and Marxism, are just two faces of the same beast. Their agendas overlap, their activities are often shared, climate change, for example, illegal immigration, so-called social justice initiatives, and all of that. What we do on the download is just that. We download you on all of this, beginning with a particular story or two of the day, and then expanding on how the basics of a given story spreads its wings and encompasses more than just the actual news item. We produce and air the download every weekday at 5 p.m. Eastern on both our site as well as our Church Militant YouTube channel. To give you a sense of just how much you can learn, I'm going to step aside here and present you Wednesday's download, where we are talking about not just the dueling rulings on the abortion pill, but going much further on the ramifications and consequences of that story. You'd be hard-pressed to find more insightful discussion than from our crew here at Church Militant. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Download. This is our hour-long show here at Church Militant, giving you discussion and analysis from a Catholic perspective on all the various topics in the world today. Today is Wednesday, April 12th, 2023, during the octave of Easter, so still happy Easter to you. I'm Michael Voris, here with our two co-hosts, Brad Eli and Christine Niles. You'll recognize them, of course, from everything. Simon is actually at home today dealing with a little home furnace crisis, so I don't know if we're supposed to reveal that private information or not.
Right,
but,
TMI.
You know, it's, TMI. Anyway, joining us today as our guest host is Nick Wiley, the wily Nick Wiley. Hello, Nick. How are you?
Hey, Mike. Just here to bring some fresher perspectives, maybe.
You mean younger. That's all right. Abortion, probably the most important issue of our time. That's the topic of today's episode, as two U.S. federal judges have issued contradictory rulings, dueling rulings, about an abortion pill. We're also going to talk about the situation we find ourselves in now as Catholics, pro-life Catholics in this country, nearly a year after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. What are Catholics to make of the way the abortion battle is playing out? Joining us now is our own Dr. William Mahoney, who's going to be obviously one of our star reporters and producers here, but also a really all-around smart guy who's tackled this topic already in some articles and all of that. He's going to talk about how one state is cracking down on trafficking minors for abortion. Let's do that first. Hello, William. How are you?
Hey, nice to see you, Michael.
Nice to see you, too. Tell us more about all of this.
So what's going on is last Wednesday, April 7th, the governor there, Brad Little of Idaho, signed House Bill 242 into law, and it includes criminalization of what it's calling abortion trafficking. And that is a minor going to another state to receive an abortion without parental consent or the consent of a guardian.
Does that now, if they are traveling on their, is a distinction in the law made if they're traveling on their own versus, hitchhiking or something, or riding a motorcycle or whatever, versus an adult taking them? Is there a distinction made in the law of that? And if it is, if an adult taking them, if that's against the law, can the adult be brought up on charges?
No, it's mostly just it's more of an umbrella thing where if a minor goes on her own over there as well without parental consent, then she's liable as well for trafficking, abortion trafficking.
Huh.
Or if anyone takes them over as well without parental consent.
That seems to me that is going to be a big talking point once this starts to get out. And, I know the law is just very recent, but once they start saying, oh, you're going to punish the woman, in this case, the girl, the minor, you're going to throw her in jail. I can imagine all the talking points starting to go crazy from the Planned Parenthood side. They
already started saying that. You have Planned Parenthood and all these, pro-abortion enthusiast groups, NARAL and all, they're already starting to say stuff like that. Oh, you're punishing children, and we need to protect children. You know how they flip the narrative on everything.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you're going over to kill a child, so yeah, it's
that's exactly right.
That's what it is. Any idea where this law sort of germinated from? Was it
originally? See, what happened was when Roe versus Wade was overturned last summer. When that was overturned, there was a trigger law in the Gem State in Idaho there, where already on the books, abortion was illegal. So that automatically went into effect, I think, like in August of the summer. And abortion in Idaho carries a prison sentence of 2 to, I think, up to 5 years. It's 2 to 3 or 2 to 5 years. And so that went right into effect. So then all these other laws started looking at all these other things. Well, what about when someone goes over to another state to get an abortion because it's now illegal here?
Right.
And that's when all this started to come from. And it was led by, of course, the Republicans in the House there, in the state House there in Idaho.
What was the margin of the victory in the chambers in the House? Do you know?
I don't remember the exact numbers, but they were pretty big. I remember the House was pretty big. It was like 56 to like 30 something, and the Senate it passed with flying colors as well. There were just a few Democrats voting against it in the Senate, so it did very well there.
Right, and the governor eagerly signed it into law. I think Nick's got a question for you here too.
Yeah, very fast, and was put out.
So what about we're talking about consent. So who can make these decisions then? Because we have all these people talking about children can consent to being able to mutilate themselves, or teachers can make that decision for the children, whatever it is with that. So who is actually able to make these decisions that will not trigger this law?
The abortion law is already triggered there. So this new law, the consent has to be from a parent or a guardian for the child. They have to have explicit permission from them to travel to another state to, kill their child.
Do they have to? Does the parent or the guardian have to accompany them, or is it enough to just say, "Yeah, I gave them my permission. Now they're hitchhiking, or their friend in high school who can drive"?
It's just permission.
It's just
I don't think
permission.
they don't have to physically be there. They just have to consent to the abortion.
See, that opens up a whole range of questions about, okay, so let's say mom and or dad or whoever didn't know, and the child goes, somehow this gets found out that they didn't have the proper consent, and they come back and somebody wants to charge them. Now mom and or dad or somebody can now lie and say, yeah, I gave consent. Yeah, that's fine. I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah. I also have a question, William. So,
yeah, sure.
Back, Planned Parenthood and the fact that they're opposing this, of course. A few years ago, Live Action did an undercover sting calling various Planned Parenthood clinics to find out, not clinics, abortuaries, basically posing as underage girls and seeing if they would be willing to not only perform abortions, but also kind of fudge the facts, because they're required to report that. And it turns out that many of these abortion mills were willing to fudge that and not report these things. So, could Planned Parenthood be accused of helping to facilitate sex trafficking of minors? Because many of these young girls are probably, that's rape. That's statutory rape.
Absolutely. If you catch them in a sting operation like that, yeah, of course they can be criminally prosecuted now in Idaho for doing something like that. The law is only, I think it goes into effect. I think at the end of the month or the middle of this month. But once it goes into effect, if they start doing that, absolutely, they can be punished severely by the criminal law in Idaho.
And they should be. They should be.
Yeah, absolutely. But Planned Parenthood has no interest in keeping good records, or they don't care about kids or anything else. They just it's all about their PR stuff and looking good, and it's all they're shameless. They're absolutely shameless. All they want is to be able to kill kids, take the money, and everyone look the other way.
Well, thank goodness it's only 3% of their income.
Oh, I know.
Or their activity.
Abortion is the most profitable thing they do.
I know a serial killer, and it's only 3% of what he does. So.
Yeah. No, abortion is hands down the most profitable thing that they do, and
I don't really know a serial killer, so
we know that they bring in billions of dollars
at least
from that.
Not that I'm aware of.
But it's ironic because their slogan and all their advertisements is care no matter what. Yeah, care about your bottom line. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, they care. They care for their money no matter what. That's what it is.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It's like them selling baby body parts and fudging that too. They don't. The only thing they care about is their money. That's it.
Right. William, I really admire Idaho for the fact that they're going to throw somebody in jail for, common sense would say that if you killed some individual, such as an abortion, you're actually going to go to jail. Hats off to Idaho for having such a tough trigger law.
Absolutely. They based their law on a Texas law, but they modified it and added this as well. So hopefully they're leading the way, and other conservative-minded states will follow suit and start doing that as well. Because I mean, I think abortion trafficking is a perfect word for it, because if not the minor, you're trafficking the baby who's about to be killed too, right? So that's not how they mean it, but there's that aspect.
Just right of there in North Dakota, still a flyover state, they wanted to go ahead and criminalize a mother, put her in jail for that. And Archbishop Aquila, then Bishop Aquila of Fargo, came out against such a criminalization. And he did not want the mother to be thrown in jail for that, and came out and wrote a piece against that. So, but hats off to Wyoming to have that, or to Idaho for having that common sense, yeah.
Hey, William, my question to you is this the most proactive pro-life law now in any state in the country? I mean, is Idaho sort of sitting at the top of the heap of doing everything they can possibly do legally?
This is definitely the most. I would say this is the most original in that aspect. Yeah, so I would say definitely, in a certain aspect, yes, this is at the top. The Texas laws are pretty strong as well, but Idaho is definitely taking a lead here. Yeah, I would say that.
Excellent. William, always a pleasure. Dr. William Mahoney, he is a fantastic, smart guy. So you can see how smart he is. He just looks smart, doesn't he?
I got books behind me. I have to be smart.
All right, B. We call him B. B, short for Bill William. Dr. B. We call him Dr. B. All right.
Dr. B. Actually, my nieces call me that. Yeah.
Thanks much, B. Talk to you later. God bless, man.
All right. See you. Bye-bye.
And now the main topic of this episode during Holy Week, we saw two conflicting rulings on a common type of abortion pill. The evening of Good Friday, a Trump-appointed judge in Texas said the FDA, Food and Drug Administration's approval of mifepristone, that's a drug commonly used for abortion in a 2-drug regimen, violated a federal rule about how drugs get approved and was therefore unlawful. That same evening, in Washington state, a federal judge issued a competing order, a dueling one really, saying the government has to maintain the status quo on the abortion drugs availability. So, guys, here we have now this, where do you take this? Well, I mean, I think everybody kind of agrees it's going to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, usually when you have split circuits or split jurisdictions, in this case, the district court, and especially on an issue this important and this relevant, I'm pretty sure 99% it's going to the U.S. Supreme Court. But just to break it down more, in this Texas case, as you mentioned, the judge placed a temporary hold on the FDA approval of mifepristone, which is also known as RU-486. And FDA originally approved this in the year 2000. So this has been around for a long time, but a group of doctors as well as medical professionals sued, challenging the safety of mifepristone, proving that whatever safety reviews they did back in 2000 were horribly inadequate. For instance, one of the things that the FDA failed to do was they did 0 studies on the effects of mifepristone on women under 18, on girls, and they approved it anyway, which to me seems like horrible malfeasance. Other proofs as well, and so the judge agreed. He said, yep, I'm going to place a hold on this. And of course, what does the Biden administration do? Merrick Garland immediately appeals the ruling, so now it's before the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals on appeal. The opposite ruling, the dueling ruling in Washington State Court, as you mentioned, Judge Thomas Rice. Brilliant. I'm glad I came up with that. This was actually, it's kind of ironic because in January of this year, the FDA actually loosened restrictions on the abortion pill. So now pharmacies, you can go get them at pharmacies. But all they ask is that the pharmacy fill out a form with the manufacturer to make them certified dispensers. There's got to be some regulation, right? Well, 18 attorneys general didn't like that. They didn't like that perfectly reasonable. They didn't like that perfectly reasonable restriction, and so they decided, for political reasons, because they probably want to be reelected, they sued the FDA, saying we don't want this restriction. Pharmacies shouldn't have to be certified. No one should have to be certified. Just give it out. Which is ridiculous because how do you know you're not getting some cheap knockoff that's going to harm women? But like I said, they don't care about women's health. They want to be reelected. So that Obama-appointed judge agreed and said, no restrictions on this. And so now you have these two opinions. And we have to remember, too, the abortion pill has taken center stage ever since Dobbs v. Jackson, ever since Roe v. Wade was overturned. Now the huge debate raging is over the abortion pill. And more than half of all abortions in this country take place through medication abortion. Mifepristone is the first step, as you mentioned, this 2-pill regimen. And mifepristone, what it does is it blocks the hormone progesterone, which is naturally released once you get pregnant. It just helps facilitate the pregnancy. Mifepristone blocks that. And then the second one, misoprostol, brings on the cramps and all that stuff, and then finally, kills the child.
Is there a reason this popped up in Washington State? Was this judge shopping, as far as we know? It seems like a oddball place to go to fight. I mean, there's Obama judges all over the country. Why did you go to Washington State?
I'm not sure, but I do know that it was initially filed by the Washington State Attorney General, along with the Oregon State Attorney General, and then they got all these other Attorney Generals on board with them.
So what's going to be the effect then if? So we take off this one drug they're doing. So what is going to be the effect if only the other one is left? So say they take mifepristone off the shelf and they are only left with the second one. What do you think is the effect with just that one?
Well, they're all saying that all these abortion providers and pharmacies and pro-abortion groups are saying, fine, if you take mifepristone off the table, then we will still continue to distribute misoprostol. But the problem is misoprostol is a lot more dangerous than mifepristone. Mifepristone is actually very dangerous. People don't really, it's like you see these statistics that the pro-aborts put out in Guttmacher saying, oh, it's got just a 0.004% of complications. What they don't realize is that the FDA does not require manufacturers to report any complications from this except for death. That's it. So when you see that tiny, tiny little fraction, all you're seeing is the death. You are not seeing the massive, thousands of women having to go to emergency medical care because parts of their baby are left inside them. That's the main reason a lot of these women get horribly sick, life-threatening. So yeah, it's not safe. And misoprostol is even worse.
Yeah, and misoprostol is actually the one that they've been trafficking. So whenever Dobbs happened, you can go on Time magazine of the 2023 Women of the Year. You have Veronica Cruz Sanchez, Mexican woman who is big on trafficking abortion drugs, and so they get them in Mexico, and it's just the misoprostol, and they send it up to America. They have over 300 volunteers in the U.S. right now, different states, different places. They've claimed to have helped over 10,000 women get these drugs illegally in states where you can't get them. And so they only send that second one because you can't, even in Mexico, the mifepristone is much harder to get. And so they're getting the misoprostol and they're sending it up into the U.S.
Yeah.
And this is a Time Woman of the Year who's sending all these drugs up here. And yeah, and even doctors here are saying, okay, if this ruling goes through and they take it off the shelf, we're just going to give them the misoprostol still. That'll be fine.
Yeah.
I'm curious just on the question of just from the medical standpoint. None of us up here are medical doctors. The question arises: this was always a 2-drug regimen. Why is it okay now? Just like in a common sense, if you're sitting with your doctor, say, well, how come I used to have to take 2 and now 1's fine? You didn't change anything. It's not like you could put it all and combined and made a different pill. You just said the first pill I don't have to take anymore after for 20 years saying I had to.
They're justifying it by claiming that misoprostol is FDA approved and therefore it must be safe. That's how they're justifying. But I just want to give people.
Yeah, but it was safe in a 2-drug regimen.
Well, it wasn't even safe then.
There's the argument back is, well, yeah, but that was when it was coupled with the first one.
Exactly. And I just want to kind of give perspective about this so-called low complication rate of mifepristone. There was a peer-reviewed medical journal article in 2021 titled "Deaths and Severe Adverse Events After the Use of Mifepristone," and 3,197 adverse effects. 20 of them were deaths. All the rest, the vast majority, either life-threatening or severe. So that just gives you an idea of what that little number is that they keep putting out to say it's safe. It's not safe. And people need to understand as well, don't listen to this sanitized version. Like, oh, I just come home and take a couple pills and it's done. It's not like that. Go watch the film Unplanned. If anybody's seen that film, there's a graphic, very disturbing scene of her having taken these abortion drugs. And it shows her writhing in agony, screaming on the floor. It's bloody. You see chunks of blood and all that stuff. And that is what it is. And these women who have given testimonies about taking these, they say, we were never told. Like, they say, oh, you'll experience a little discomfort. It's not discomfort.
Yeah,
they're on the floor screaming. Cramp. No, they're screaming in agony for hours and wishing it would stop. It's traumatizing emotionally, physically, it's yeah, it's nothing like what they claim.
Now, isn't there supposed to be some medical supervision being given, some counseling before it? How far along in your pregnancy? What happens if you're over 10 weeks pregnant? Talked about the complications there versus just sending this drug home with no medical oversight. The complications are completely...
No, exactly. Yeah, and actually there are some states that have, I think there's maybe a couple states that have imposed that restriction where you have to do it in person because of this. But there are some states that are like, nope, mail it, do it by mail. Abortion by mail, that's what they're calling it now. They've already legalized that in the UK,
right,
which a lot of people are upset about.
And maybe a woman's 10 weeks and, a couple more days along, or, another 11 weeks along. Why should she be able to take this? No one's sitting there giving her counseling about how drastic this is if you're taking it too far along in the pregnancy.
Exactly, which is why so many women, as many as 6% of these women in the US end up in the ER because they had no idea about the complications. Like I said, most of those, because they still have parts of their baby in their stomach and it's getting infected. 6% translates to more than 20,000 women per year in the United States.
That was my question. Are hospitals required? I know there are extraordinarily strict reporting requirements for all sorts of things when it comes to the medical field. When I was back in news, I did back in secular news, I did a big, giant story on the mortality tables, but I remember that the reporting requirements for hospitals on everything. You walk in with a stubbed toe, they got to record it as that. There's Medicare codes and Medicaid codes that go along with it, and insurance codes. That is an empire of data and information. I'm curious if this particular thing, if you report, self-report, or call an ambulance because you can't do anything, is this tracked, or is this another one of the sort of sacred cow things that we can't talk about it because it's about abortion, even though people die?
I think it's tracked by the FDA, but it's not reported because it's not required to be reported. So if you want to find out about it, you've got to write to the FDA and ask them, give me the statistics, but they don't report it anywhere publicly.
And then our hospitals, because some things are required to be reported on a federal level, others are required to be reported on a state level. And I'm wondering which one of these two, does it fall under both categories? I would not be surprised if you went, like here in Michigan, for example, because it's such a pro-abortion state, that you would, whatever the federal reporting requirements were, could be sidestepped by state reporting requirements, and you call both and you get two entirely different sets of data. So the data, I'm going to guess, is not reliable, which is my big long way around the barn way of saying those numbers you gave, I bet, are much lower than what the reality is.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
And they're going to do that. They're going to underreport. They're going to do all these things. But to bring this into a more Catholic perspective, this happened. These rulings happened on Good Friday. We had the Dobbs decision came out on the Feast of the Sacred Heart. These are all very important days to Catholics especially. And I can't help but think that there's a very strong message from God about just where this country and all is going. And I know, Brad, you have a bunch of numbers on just where people, conservatives, Democrats, and even just people of religion, like what they're saying now as opposed to then what their latest stance is on abortion.
Well, the divided courts are understandable, but they don't really tank my optimism for this country like the divided voter populace out there. When Dobbs was overturned back in June, the Feast of the Sacred Heart, we kind of all had this sense of elation that this was going to really move the ball, that the pro-lifers really had the pro-aborts on the run here.
Well, it did move the ball.
But the thing is, of course, a lot of people thought, well, now abortion's, outlawed, and of course it didn't. It threw it back to the states. But what does that mean?
Yeah.
That threw back to the states, not just the lawmakers there who could actually do this, but also back to the contracepting boomers and the unchurched millennials and the amoral Gen Z to go ahead and have these referendums coming out. And this was the scary thing. Just as late as August of last year, when Kansas, of all, the flyover state of Kansas, red Kansas, Anti-Am and Toto and the whole bit right there, right? And it says, no, we're going to have, we affirmed this, this right to abortion in our state. It's like, wow, really? And then, Kentucky said, well, we don't have it in our state, right? And the referendum says, well, actually you do. And Montana couldn't even find the ability, because they had it on the books already, abortion.
Right.
But they couldn't even find the ability with their referendum to protect the those who are born alive.
Right.
So now that this baby is born in your hospital in Montana, and we can't be constrained to go ahead and save that baby's life. So those referendums, that dividedness at the voter populace level was really what took the wind out of many people's sails. I mean, this particular battle right here amongst the courts, yeah, maybe the Supreme Court will have some common sense there. But at the voter level, what are you going to do about that? Because you got to overturn the whole morality of a country now.
There's an article that was just written, what is today, Wednesday, written in, I believe it was Monday on Fox News' article page. Said, here is the surefire, remedy or whatever for Republicans, and it was get rid of the abortion issue.
Yeah, that's something I've seen. I've been with people on Twitter about this all the time. People who are conservative voices, not like your huge names, but people who have hundreds of thousands of followers. Look, guys, if we could just drop the abortion issue. They post these polls and they're just like, look, we're winning on all these different things. It's just the abortion thing. If you just drop that, well, then you've just lost your whole soul and you're just going to lose all those other ones along the way.
I think we should just let's ignore the slavery issue.
No.
Oh.
Let's ignore the slavery issue and let's talk about school choice,
It's
and
not popular and people don't like it.
that 14th, 15th, and 16th Amendment, the whole Civil War thing. It's probably a little overstated. Let's just ignore that and get on with tax breaks.
Every day on Fox News, it's what do the American people have to say about abortion? Or all these different places. It's no one supports the third trimester abortions, of course. Like, that's ridiculous. But you gotta get rid of this idea of, Florida wants to look at a 6-week ban. Oh, Ron DeSantis, his political career is over.
Yeah.
He's trying for 6 weeks.
I think that's really the huge issue right there, that people just don't want to talk about it.
Right.
I'm morally against it, but so is Bill Clinton, right?
Yeah.
I'm personally against, personally opposed. Everybody's personally opposed. Well, let's talk to some people who are not personally opposed, actually in the tank for this.
Yep.
Now, let's look at a Pew Research here poll that came out recently that, of course, in Dem voters, you actually have 73% want it legal. Okay, 73% of the blue state voters, they want it's legal in their state. Okay, that's understandable. That's why
medication abortion.
That's why pro-abortion medication. That's what we're talking about here. Abortion pill. They want that legal in their state. Now, that's not surprising. You got California, Vermont, and even Michigan here, right, are wanting abortion in their state. But let's look at what you guys are just talking about right there. Let's look at the next graphic, which is really the one that takes the wind out of the sails right here. They want it legal. Look at that middle number there. They want it legal, the position on medication abortion with the GOP voters. Those who are Republican or lean GOP. 35%, a good third or more of that group wants it to be legal. Now put that on top of all the people you guys were just talking about who said, well, let's not talk about it. We're not against it. We're not for it, but we don't want to talk about it. You take all those people who don't want to talk about it, and then the ones who are totally in the tank and say, no, we need this in our state. How are they going to offset 73% of the blue state voters?
Well, they're not.
Which is what I'm saying here. So you have a dueling ruling here. Yes, this is a problem. But the grassroots problem, how are you going to fix it?
That's the problem.
Yeah, this is why conservatives lose. It's why we always seem to lose, because you have the left, which is insanely, demonically zealous for their cause, and they are non-stop pushing it. I mean, evil never rests. It's non-stop. We have this, like I was saying yesterday, this tidal wave of constant evil coming at us. And who's holding it back? Who? Really? Like 1/3?
And that's 1/3 of the subset of Republican or leaning Republicans. So you're talking.
They're in the tank with the Dems.
Yeah, they are. Most of them are. How can you be unsure on this? I'd question the poll on Pew, asking it with regard to medication, I was going to say Medicare, medication abortions, the abortion pill. I don't really think people at home care one way or the other. The question, whether it's a pill or you go into a doctor's office, or a clinic, an abortuary. That question, when you break the numbers down, just doing a little quick math there, that's about the thing. About 19 to 20% of Americans want abortion illegal in all circumstances. The method by which the abortion comes in, is really, it doesn't matter. And the same is true of the other roughly 80% who are like, yeah, you know, I saw maybe there should be some restriction, or, you know, I suppose if the baby survives the abortion, you shouldn't strangle it, you know, in the operating room. Well, that's very kind of you, thank you. But minus that, I mean, this country is split. It's always been. I've been covering abortion since back in 1983 when I started in the news. That number has not changed. It's 19 to 21% of Americans want abortion illegal in all circumstances, and it has never budged.
And that's disturbing.
And that's
too.
it right there.
That's disturbing because it was a bit more understandable back in the 1970s when everybody was saying, oh, it's just a clump of tissue, and then you didn't have any proof to give that, like visual proof otherwise.
4D sonograms.
Exactly. But now you do. Yeah. Now you have the graphic abortion pictures. Now you have all of this. And yet still the number is the same.
I think the point you're making there about the galvanization of the left and how in lockstep they are on every single issue. 73% aren't saying, well, maybe we should talk about it or not. Maybe they're for it, and they're vocal about it, and they're out there and they're militant. And our group over here is saying, well, 1/3 of us or 1/3 are really for it, and another don't want to talk about it. So this is a litmus test of just how shattered on all fronts, whether it's religion, whether it's actually, should we have our industry over in America, or should we just buy cheap stuff from China? We talked about yesterday, economics. That was another metric of how far we have fallen. On our policy, on foreign policy, on what level are we going to get solidarity on the right? There is nothing.
And it reminds me, too, of...
What issue would you galvanize around?
Yeah. Well, it reminds me a little bit of the conservative reaction to the whole transgender stuff. I know Matt Walsh has been going on about this, how he's very brutally honest about how this is destroying the country and they're grooming children and corrupting our youth. And yet he's gotten pushback from conservatives saying, oh, don't be so mean.
Yeah.
You know, Dylan Mulvaney is just, he's so nice. Why do you have to be so mean?
He's just funny.
It's like, and these are conservatives.
The recent thing is that, oh, if Matt Walsh would just shut up, it would just go away. Like, he's making them famous. Like, by protesting them, by doing all this work, by exposing these different places and getting different things shut down. He's got a pretty good track record of what he's actually done. But
I think Bud Light handing him, you know, a few $1 million in promotional money is what actually gives him oxygen.
Exactly.
Not Matt Walsh reacting to that.
Yeah.
It's just like, if we would just shut up about it, you know, it would go away.
Yeah,
but I mean, the deeper issue is really the fact that, first off, most GOP people don't care at all. Even the elected politicians, it's a talking point. Yeah, you know, I'm not really for abortion.
You got to go to fundraisers every 2 years.
The politicians are never going to do anything. But deeper is the fact that this is just an anti-God country, and there's actually nothing that we do that actually promotes motherhood. And that is where these people get validation, and that's some of the left's actually strongest talking points are, okay, if you say there's no abortion, where are these people supposed to go? And the GOP response is, oh, you know, you can go start a 501c3 and you can figure out how to raise money, take care of it. There's no government policies that are actually promoting people to have families and to have strong mothers at home or in any circumstance. There's nothing that we have. There's nothing that we're doing. We're not like Hungary. We're not like these other people who are implementing these policies like, hey, you know what, instead of sending our tax dollars to other countries and doing all this, we can take that same money that we're already getting and put it towards our country and our best resource, which is the family.
The only time the U.S. government has ever done anything even related to what you're talking about, the promotion of, I guess I wouldn't necessarily say family, the promotion of childbirth, was when they reformed the welfare laws and said, if you keep the baby, you're going to get this much money. What it did was destroy the family in the black community. Absolutely wiped it out. And you see this in city after city after city. Now, I was looking at statistics last night, because that's what I do, because I'm a statistics geek. I'm looking at statistics last night. The absolute highest violence and murder rates are in every single one of those places that is dominated by Democrats and the Democratic policy of, yeah, have as many kids as you want. We'll pay for him. By the way, if you want to kill him, we'll help pay for that too. They have destroyed the family. That's the only time state or federal government in the United States has ever talked about promoting, and they're not promoting it for anything other than just to destroy the family. It's not promoting children being born for the sake of children being born and them being a gift from God. And, you know, this is, I want to throw out a question and see what your guys' reaction to it is here. So Yeah, the federal thing is bad. It's a mess. I don't even know how you begin to fix that. I really don't. It's many people would be of the opinion it's so far gone, there's nothing you can really do. So let's devolve to the states. There's a question, Marjorie Taylor Greene brought it up there, in time for a divorce, great national divorce, I guess to avoid a civil war, I guess. The question of balkanization. I've been talking to a number of people who are very plugged in politically, and those whispers are now starting to become loud murmurs among certain conservative groups and in some circles in the Republican Party that should some of these states start to secede? And if so, what does that look like? And the driving issue is abortion.
Just to add on the line of that question and to sort of provide a counterpoint to some of the states and voters that Brad was highlighting before, we do have 12 states with either total or near total bans on abortions. That's some good news. I mean, there's some, they total crackdown on the medication abortions too, and then we got 15 states with some restrictions on abortion. So there are definitely some states that are very hardcore and very gung-ho about the abortion issue. Now, as far as seceding from the Union, I don't see how that doesn't result in total civil war, just like, with the North and the South before. I don't see how that's even possible without a total civil war. I mean, people would have to get ready to go to war, shed blood.
So here's a question. We went to war over the question of slavery. People were shooting and killing. That wonderful Ken Burns series on the Civil War. We had this giant civil war. There was that line in there. It was seared in my memory. So that we could become a nation that could never dream of this ever being possible again. Well, here we are again. I mean, are 1 million children a year worth going to war over? And I don't know how it breaks apart. I'm just asking the question.
I'm not sure either, because at least with the North and South, you had like a clear sort of delineation. But with this, you've got states scattered all over. I'm not quite sure how it would work.
Since 2021, 2 million Americans have moved out of big cities. Most of them have gone to red states. I don't think they've gone to red states because they're going down. There's like some infiltration thing to try to overthrow Mississippi and make it a liberal Democrat stronghold. They're getting out of those areas. So there is some degree of this. I don't even necessarily call it a balkanization, but there's movement of like, I'm sick of this now. I can't be here anymore. So it seems that's the kind of stuff that some of these political types I'm talking to are bringing up, saying, some of this is already just kind of naturally occurring. It's organically occurring. So I don't know what it would look like. I don't know if you draw, are you not allowed? So here was a very, very interesting point to this. It wasn't abortion per se, but it's all tied into it. That if somebody moves from a blue state, this is actually being discussed as a serious thing. And we can break that news here, as a matter of fact, that within political, very conservative American value, all of that, what we understand that to mean, within those circles, there's a discussion now beginning that if you move from a blue state to a red state, you will be denied the right to vote.
That's unconstitutional.
Because it's a state issue. States get to decide who votes, not federal. It's not a federal issue.
Right, but there's the right to travel in the Constitution.
You can travel, you can move there, you can buy all kinds of houses, but you can't vote. As a matter of fact, you can't vote unless your grandparents lived here and their parents
they would try to find someone.
Oh, it'd definitely go to court. Yeah. But you're having that kind of discussion. That's a serious discussion going on right now. I just found out about it last night when I was talking to some folks. I'm like, really? And that was the very first thing. So we came to. He said, no. States control the right to vote. You can move wherever you want. They can't stop you from crossing from Arkansas into Missouri or whatever, but they can stop you from voting. That's an interesting question.
That is, but then you can, on the flip side, you can make the argument that does violate the right to travel, because then that deprives you of a right. It punishes you. So in that sense, it kind of infringes on this right to travel.
It would be a brouhaha in the courts, that's for sure. But notice what's bringing up the discussion, that these are two different countries right now.
But I don't know. I've lived a lot of places now, and really, are they? Because we've had this total homogenization of culture. Everywhere you go is basically the same. I mean, living in the South almost my whole life, moving here, the only real difference is the food. And so,
and the sub-zero temperature.
The temperatures too, but it's like it's just the fact that we have so far moved, and we have no values, we have no customs really anymore, to where, okay, if Texas, you'd have to succeed with Texas if you're in the South because they have all the resources and also all the southern states go together. Okay, Austin's the most liberal city probably in the USA right now, maybe. And then you have the other cities as well. New Orleans is crazy, Myrtle capital.
So let's raise that question. So the liberals in Austin, granted, very extremely liberal city, capital of Texas, of all places. Somehow this happens and they secede, or they say we're doing this or we're doing that, and abortion is going to be illegal, and blah 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 blah, and all this. Why would you stay there? Yeah, why wouldn't you move if you were one of the liberals? Like, I'm not doing. Why can't the migration door go both ways?
Because that's what they do, though. It is all about. When education was better, why didn't they move? When all these different things, like they're here to stay. They're here to attack. They fight. They're ready to fight way more than we're ready to fight.
Well, I mean, get out of the state. You know, we've just ruled abortion is illegal. But if you don't like it, lump it.
What are we going to found? What are we going to found our values on? It's not going to be Christ. There's just not enough people who actually believe in Jesus. It's not going to be Christ. We're not going to have this actual set of values that we even have the ability to follow. So why would this national divorce not just turn into what we have right now in just a few generations?
Well, I'm going to take a somewhat opposite view because I don't think our entire country is homogeneous. I actually think it's more polarized than ever. I think we see massive evil on one side, then we see some people on the other side. Not enough. But certainly you've got some people on their side fighting like hell to preserve this country and save it and bring it back to its Christian roots. So yeah, I don't think that we're all like all the same. I think all you have to do is look at the difference between like Michigan and Florida, and the governors and some of the laws are being passed. And people are moving, like during COVID. How many people moved out of New York City? Yeah. Because they were absolutely sick of these COVID restrictions and some of the defund police garbage and all that stuff. So you had a massive influx of people into Florida and things like that. So yeah, and also as far as traveling, that's why we have the constitutional republic that's been set up in our Constitution. It's created so that each state can pass its own laws with regard to this sort of issue, and then you have the right to move out if you wish.
Sure.
That's just part of democracy.
Bring up on that logistics. I'm a logistics guy. How does it work on paper? Back in 1860, you had a level playing field. Now you have the federal government with F-15s and nuclear bombs and tanks, and you almost have nothing except a cell phone. We can't even gather on a street corner because, they just shut your account off.
So let's stop there for 1 second. Let's ask that. Do you really think that there would be the stomach for members of the military to go strafing Main Street because they no longer wanted to belong to that liberal, crazy devil side of America?
Well, not on a state level, but a federal level, you can have some woke troops out there. They've been stripping out. Obama stripped out all the middle management.
You do something. If something like that were to happen, I think you would have this massive division immediately with the military.
Yeah.
And look, you're going to go to like Fort Bragg, and people aren't going to, good guys in uniform aren't going to like start shooting at each other and taking that equipment. I think that if Biden or whoever runs him or whatever the case is were to send U.S. troops against secessionist-minded American citizens, all hell would break loose on the spot. The
military doesn't seem very crazy about Biden. I mean, all you have to do is look at some of the videos comparing soldiers' reactions to Trump versus soldiers' reactions to Biden. Night and day difference. I mean, the soldiers with Trump cheering him, everybody's wanting to talk to him. Everyone's Biden comes through, it's just more like a cold, sort of polite response. So
the president turned back on him. What's that? You'd instantly win the police.
Yeah.
That's what you would win. You would instantly win. All the cops would be on your side.
Well, remember what happened with COVID. Even here in Michigan, I was going to say the name that I referred to her by, Governor Gretchen Whitmer, when she issued her orders and her shutdown things and everything. I mean, there were like 8 sheriffs who said, "Screw you." Yeah. I don't care. I'm enforcing it. We're not doing it. Right. So, you can exercise the power all you want, but you got to enforce the power too.
Now, speaking to another thing that you talked about, though, what about if they all move to different states? That should actually, under the Founding Fathers, probably be okay to kind of neutralize itself. California, Michigan, New York, you're all tanking financially. Everybody's moved out. That should have collapsed you guys. The problem with that, why that doesn't work, is because you have socialism at the federal level. So we, as taxpayers in all
So you
red
walk
states,
out of the federal system and start your own country.
we, as the federal at the federal level, they are subsidizing California for their stupidity.
Sure they are.
And New York and Michigan and burning down all the cities during the BLMers, right? The riots. And then we have to pay for all of that, right?
Well, and now you're watching it. You look.
And that's why it doesn't
But the
work
thing is, that's why originally,
to move out of a state.
Originally, it was never supposed to be like that. Originally,
Exactly.
we never had this massive federal government machine.
Yeah,
It was
exactly.
like the founding fathers would be horrified to come back and see how much power the federal government has over us.
It's the
now.
imperial presidency. It's the all-powerful empire of the Capitol building, and everything gets decided for you there on everything.
Yeah.
And they
you know,
don't have
income tax. They never envisioned an income tax.
Right.
None of
You
this.
know, like the original states, they were like countries unto themselves, and they were fiercely proud of being a Virginia.
Absolutely. That's why they have their own flags.
Right. It was much more. It was almost like going to another country. I mean, that's how proud they were of their own identity. Now it's like we're all America.
And that's federal level. They
under
don't
the
even
federal
have to roll
government.
tanks. All you do is shut your cell phones off. Nobody even heard about it. Shut your water off. Shut your electricity off. Shut all these things off. Shut your gasoline at the pumps off. They can do.
Yeah, but
all
somebody
that.
has to physically do that.
Yes.
Somebody has to physically
A lot of
enforce
that
that
is just
mandate.
hacking the system. They can hack any system. So I'm just saying.
I know.
The massive amount of power that they have, not even just firepower, but the massive amount of electronic power they have over because of all the supply chain stuff. None of that exists in 1860.
Right.
I shot my deer. I got a little hungry. So the people who are talking that are not talking. We ain't 1860.
No, I agree with that. It's one of the things I've always said is you're talking about, if they clamp down and they take us on the trains and off we go and that's it. And people are going to start shooting. And remember what Biden said? I hope you can, deal with the F-15s coming after you with your guns. Yeah, that's the point. What's the driving force of all of this? The abortion question.
But
it has always been the driving force. I had a discussion when I was at CBS News in 1983 with a producer on 60 Minutes, and I said to her, the United States will go to civil war over the question of abortion. Because abortion, and she looked at me like I was crazy. And here we are, 40 whatever it is years later, 40 years later, talking about this very thing. And I'm not the only one talking about it. So you got these abortion laws, you've got this, what happens when the federal government says, oh, we're going to withhold your highway funds from you because we have the imperial federal government. Idaho, we don't like what you just did. We're not going to repair your highway roads because you're protecting babies. We don't like that.
Or when you have an AG who sends a SWAT team to terrorize a pro-lifer because they're praying outside an abortion mill, which obviously has already happened several times. It has been nice to see, though, the pushback that Garland has gotten, and that there have been some senators like Josh Hawley who have fought very hard against this and really pushed back against this. But I think the majority of Americans were not in favor of that action.
And meanwhile, our enemies are getting stronger as we're getting more and more divided. So we talked about economics yesterday, and that's just economic warfare happening. Those guys are all consolidating at a rapid pace, and we probably won't have to worry about dividing ourselves in this country and shooting each other because we're all going to be taken off the gulags as soon as they come rolling into the country because there's nothing.
Well, that's a cheery thought. You heard that right here, folks.
There's nothing. So don't worry about us getting into a civil war. It ain't even get that far. And it's over these issues, and I really believe the left, and to go all the way back to the devil and all this type of stuff, getting us divided on these extremely important issues.
The sexual revolution.
And it just keeps driving the wedge and driving the wedge, and as we're broken apart, then the vultures of society, communism, machine talked about, come in and eat the dead carcass.
The entire underpinning is gone, and I think we have to deal with that. And this is one of the things we talked to all kinds of politically conservative Catholics and people who are not Catholic, but share much of all of this together. Abortion, gay marriage, blah blah blah, all of it. But there is this sense of there's just not enough action. There's not enough people. So, the degree of outrage is there. Degree of outrage is there on the left also, but it translates into stuff. They burn down cities, they drop off bricks and destroy, communities, and they kill people, and they raid stores and they loot and they do everything. I'm not saying this stuff is good. I'm saying they do something. There is never anything done by the people who are conservative, God-minded, fearing. Even if you're not Catholic, what are you doing about abortion? What are you physically doing about abortion? we had a question sent to us. Would it be morally right if you knew no one was in that abortion, however you would have that certitude? Could you then throw a firebomb, a Molotov cocktail or something through the window and destroy the place? I don't know. That was the question that was raised on the after World War II. You had a duty. The Allies had a moral duty to bomb Auschwitz, to bomb, Treblinka, to bomb Dachau, and they didn't. So, I don't know. I think these are all very, and again, what's the heart of all of this? It's abortion. It's abortion. You've got two federal judges who have completely different outlooks on this, hand down their rulings. It's going to go up to the Supreme Court. That'll be like, oh, it's the Trump judges. And they'll just start making their pleas for now we got to stack the court. This is why we got to win the White House. We got to control the Senate. The whole game just keeps going and going and going. And it's allowed to go. That's my point. It's allowed to go on because conservatives don't do anything.
Yeah,
That's the point.
And then when they do try to do something, you got the other conservatives going, shh.
Yeah, exactly. Most of them.
Maybe be nicer.
Yeah, the Napa Valley crowd.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't like your tone.
You don't win. It's like the thing with the timing, I guess. Like, okay, when should we allow it? Of like heartbeat bill, 6 weeks, whatever. Yeah. Normally, the people are like, okay, we can. More people agree with this, so just stay there, and then we can win more voters. No, all you're doing is you're pissing off pro-life people. Yeah. Because your Democrats are going to vote Democrat no matter what. You giving us a heartbeat bill versus you giving us a 25-week bill makes no difference to the Democrat voter. You're not winning a single. Anybody who's for abortion is not going to. Okay, well, they gave me 19 weeks this time. I can stomach that.
Yeah, that's okay.
It's never going to happen. It's an all or nothing cause on both fronts.
Yeah, it's always been all or nothing. That's a good point from both of you guys. It's you just never retreat from the foundational principle, and the right has retreated constantly and does nothing.
One thing I'd like to throw in there, though, when you come out here about against abortion, and you say, well, you're against these mothers who are struggling with all this and all that. What you brought up, we've not done much for women.
We're not. That's the main point.
And when you mentioned Matt Walsh, he had a great talk. He talked about transgender and that. He had a great talk the other day to transgenders. And he had a great point that applies to abortion. He was talking to transgender. He says the left, the establishment, media, the politicos, they don't care about you. Right. And he repeated that to them in different ways, and he says they don't, and you're being used by them. That same talk that he gave, you just have to remove transgender to a group of women who suffered through failed abortions or the post-traumatic stress of abortion, who have lost, their character because of all this. And he could have given that talk to them and said, the left does not care about you at all. That's why fake Gavin Newsom, fake Catholic Gavin Newsom, out in California bought enough of these abortion drugs to go ahead and kill 2 million babies. Just because if they goes off the market, I want to make sure I can still kill babies.
Several states are doing that.
It's a political thing. They're using these women, and they have to see it at some time. The transgender community, who are just completely emotionally vulnerable, women who are, we're talking in Idaho, who are these women who are completely emotionally vulnerable, a teenage mom, pregnant teenage mother. And we're talking about these people, and they don't care about you. They really don't. And so when we're talking here from this standpoint and perspective and pro-lifers, they really do care about that mother. They care about her whole future, and also about the baby that she's going to be losing, and about the transgender community, what you're doing to yourself with these chemical castration drugs, and of course these abortion drugs we're talking about today. That's got to be out there, knowing that who really does care about these people. Yeah, and it's the Christians out there, the people who will stand up and speak for them.
And a point you make is, with all the craziness going on in the world, the Marxization of everything, your whole thing has always been, when is it going to be that you've suffered enough?
Right.
And for this cause, it's when is it going to be, when have enough babies died? Because we report...
70 million apparently,
we're
not there
report that, but I mean, you go to the abortifications, you go to back alley ones, you go to these illegal ones coming from Mexico, all that. Well over 100 million, sure, just roundabout number. How many more? Why would God save us? Why would He come and do all these things and fix our country for us whenever we don't care that 100 million plus whatever have just gone and no one's really doing much about it?
Yeah, that's true. This is Well, I think we've had a extraordinarily thoughtful discussion today. Everything leads to everything else. There's connect the dots. That's what we do here at Church Militant. That's what we do. Thanks for joining us for this new download. Leave your comments and let us know how you think about this. It's our first week back. We took a little hiatus from it because, frankly, it's exhausting, isn't it, Christine? No, it's our pleasure to bring it to you. These are the kinds of discussions that need to be had and open up people's minds and get them talking and thinking and get away from, as Pope Francis said, he may have said it for different reasons, stop being a keyboard warrior. Yeah, he's actually right on that. His motive for saying it, I don't know, but that's a fair point. So we're going to finish up as we always finish up with a prayer to our Blessed Mother, asking for her intercession for our nation and the church. So please join us in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen. Salve Regina, Mater Misericordiae, vita dulcedo et spes nostra salve. Ad te clamamus exules filia Eve. Ad te suspiramus gementes et flentes in hac lacrimarum vale. Ei ergo advocata nostra, illos tuos misericordes oculos ad nos converte, et esum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilium ostende, O clemens, O pia, O dulcis Virgo Maria. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you again for joining us for this download. We're going to be premiering a new episode like this every weekday, Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern. Be sure and tell your friends about it as well. From all of us here at Church Militant, God bless you.